evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with Stephanie Burke and John Brightman. The silent assassin Matt Costa is directing from a bunker somewhere. And let's see, let's turn that on and make sure that that's on. Those are both on, right? Go ahead, just talk, make sure we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. And John,
yes.
You're on? Okay. All right, sometimes I don't hit the right buttons, but I'm looking, and that says number 4 right on it. So I can't screw that up if it has the number right on it. And we are here to talk about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night, getting a little bit of a later start tonight, but that's all right. Maybe we'll make it up on the back end. I don't know. I'm hungry, though. I haven't eaten, so.
I just had McDonald's
food.
on the way.
Did you really?
Yes. When you pulled up, I was eating it.
Seriously?
Yes.
I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, I went right to. I came here first, dropped some stuff off, and then I went right to wrestling, and then
I'm
came
disappointed.
Here right from
I
there.
thought you were going to have a match tonight.
Eventually, it'll happen. It'll have to happen eventually because the Thunder from Down Under, Michael Foster, got physical with me a couple of times, beat me down a couple of times.
Yep.
Got himself thrown out of House of Bricks Wrestling.
For good?
Oh yeah, he was thrown out. Like, he's suspended. He's not supposed to be anywhere on the property. Still comes back and beats me down again. And so I missed the last show because I think we had an event or something or what have you. But I missed the last House of Bricks show of last year. I show up tonight, and the champion, the heavyweight champion, is some guy named Captain Australia.
Oh.
Wearing a mask, but yet looking suspiciously like Michael Foster. Same gear, same shirt, same pants, same boots, same moves, same, everything. So I'm like, no, that's definitely Michael Foster. And he insists that he's Captain Australia and he's a completely different wrestler. And
Wow.
I'm not buying it, so we'll have to see what happens. So him and I got into it a little bit again tonight, and I'm going to keep my eye on him. I'm going to be having a talk with the House of Bricks Championship Committee. Because if I can prove that that's Michael Foster, I will have him stripped of that title. There
you go.
Because he shouldn't be holding that belt if he's suspended from House of Bricks.
This is true.
Might I add that you look quite snazzy tonight?
Thank you. I was getting chance of get an iron from the crowd. I was getting chance of iron that suit.
Really?
Oh yeah, the suit was basically it was in a bag. I was like, I wonder what happened to my suit the last time that we did an evening of ghost stories and New England legends. Did I bring it to the dry cleaner and never pick it up? Because usually I don't. Usually I just come home and I throw it down, and then I'm like, I'll get that to the dry cleaner eventually, and then I'll hang it up in my closet. And then what ends up happening is I find out I need it, or it's a week before I need it again. And I'm like, I should probably bring that to the dry cleaner. And that's when I do it. So I was like, oh gee, what did I do? Did I bring it to the dry cleaner? Did I leave it at the theater? Like, nobody called me to tell me I left it at the theater. So finally I found the bag, and sure enough, it was all rolled up in a ball.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the shirt, the jacket, the pants, everything all rolled up in a ball. And I was like,
speaking of pants,
let me air it out anyway.
Candace wants to know if you're wearing pants.
I am currently, but I might take them off because you said you were cold, and I'm warm.
I did. I'm freezing. I have a blanket on right now.
I'm very, very warm. And the only thing is I don't have any cereal to eat when I take my pants off like Candace does.
That's her thing? Yeah.
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 Well, we'll tell you later.
Listen, it's a long story.
Even if I tell you, I don't know if it'll make a difference.
No, probably not, but it's just a thing. You just gotta roll with it.
So tonight's show is going to be we have to tread very carefully with this topic because we're going to be talking about voodoo.
Right.
Because there's been some incidents that have happened locally over the past couple of weeks. We talked about one of them last week. And if you remember, if you listened to last week's show, I know I have to get the podcasts up, don't remind me. But if you listened to last week's show, you know that there was a crime that happened here a couple of weeks ago. The women were just arrested last week, prior to last week's show, in which they were two sisters that were supposedly voodoo practitioners, that a friend of theirs had a child who she felt, 5-year-old girl, that she felt was possessed by some kind of a demon. So she brought her to these two women that she knows, and basically the mother, the daughter, and the 8-year-old son all moved in with them while they were conducting these rituals, kind of 24 hours a day on this girl. And they burned her by blowing fire in her face, and she has 3rd-degree burns on her face. She'll be permanently disfigured. They threatened to cut the brother's head off. They pushed things against the brother's throat and choked him. They rubbed some sort of weird plant mixture on him. At one point, they told the brother that they were punishing him because he wanted to have sex with girls. This is an 8-year-old kid.
Okay.
And when they're disfiguring the 5-year-old, trying to get this demon out of her. Every once in a while, you hear a weird story like this, and then it goes away, and okay, it's probably just somebody's mental illness playing out. But it didn't sit right with me because it's one thing if you say somebody's mentally ill, but there's 3 adults. 3. I was holding up 5. There's 3 adults involved in this. There's the mother of the children.
Right.
And 2 sisters. So you can't tell me that all 3 of them
are mentally ill,
are suffering from some sort of delusional tendencies. I mean, there's something at work there. Even if it's the matter of, one of them has kind of made the other 2 think that this stuff is real or whatever, what have you. There might be some sort of hysteria going on, but there's 3 adults involved in this situation. So I didn't sit right with me, but I'm like, okay, fine. It'll be another 5 years before we hear about anything voodoo related. It didn't take long because Monday, the story broke that there was a murder in Brockton.
Right.
That 2 young children were murdered. And they were ages 5 and 8. They didn't say what gender they were. They just had a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. And it hit me in the gut when I heard that because I said, oh my God, I hope it wasn't those kids.
Yeah.
And so I texted Taylor, the news director here, and I said, I get a bad feeling that this is somehow related to that thing that happened last week. And he's like, no, those kids were those kids were in Bridgewater. Like, it doesn't matter. They could be staying with family in Brockton.
Yep.
They could be in a foster home or something, that they could be in Brockton. And he's like, no, I wouldn't worry about it. It's probably, not related. It's a tragedy, but it's probably not related. And then the story comes out that the mother had admitted to stabbing them. Mm-hmm. Well, that's odd because why would a mother, first of all, I believe she had a 3rd child home with her. Mm-hmm. So why would she have stabbed 2 of the children, not the 3rd? I mean, not that we want to see another person die, but still, it just doesn't seem right.
Doesn't make sense.
So it seemed odd to me. And then, sure enough, they arraign her the next morning, and she's telling them that it was a voodoo ritual gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And that her family was saying she had practiced voodoo in the past, but she was also obsessed with the Illuminati and was looking at all these conspiracy websites and all things like that. So I start to wonder, like, okay, we have 2 voodoo cases now within a week of each other. And I mean, I know,
and within not even 10 miles of one another.
No, one town next to the other.
Next town over.
So I know you and I were talking, and I chose not to dive into this because as a parent, it makes me sick to my stomach. And I just figured there's enough going on in my life right now that I couldn't bring myself to read into it. But I figured, I'll wait till we're on the air tonight and get all the facts. And obviously I know coming from you, they're correct because you work the news. Did you ever find out if these 2 cases are related?
From all of the people, I mean, I went through everything that I could to find out if these women knew each other at all in any way, whether it be the 2 sisters that were arrested for the abuse, whether it be the mother of the 2 children that left them with the voodoo practitioners, and the family and even the extended family of the woman who killed her 2 children. I'm trying to find any connections that I can, Googling their names together, social media connections, anything, seeing if they have any similar. And what's weird about it is the mother involved with the mother whose 2 kids were part of last week's case, the 2 sisters, and the mother who stabbed her children. Those 4 women, not one of them have a Facebook profile or on Twitter.
Really?
I couldn't find them on Instagram. I mean, maybe they do, but not under their regular name. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will have like their first and middle name as their Facebook name. So, but even going into some of the Facebook groups, like the Brockton groups and things like that, people didn't know, they couldn't find any kind of presence for these people online.
Not only that, too, most of the time, the media itself will search out. I mean, like, you remember when Baby Doe happened in Boston Harbor? Was that last year or the year before?
I think the year before.
Poor little Bella, who was 2 years old, who was murdered by her mother. This baby went unnamed, undiscovered for months. And when she was finally identified by the neighbors, the media had plastered her Facebook page all over the place. The mother's Facebook page, videos, personal pictures,
really?
Everything. Yes. As soon as it came out, the media, like big time, like national news had plastered her Facebook page and all of her personal information everywhere. So the fact that that hasn't happened yet, maybe they don't have Facebook pages, but maybe they're running from something. Maybe
I couldn't find anything, and we only have a few minutes here before we go to the news, and we're going to be joined by an actual voodoo practitioner in the next hour who can give us a little bit more insight. Probably not into the local voodoo scene, but maybe from this area originally, I guess, or has been in this area in the past. And it's Senn Moise.
I believe so.
And so we will talk with him coming up. But there have been other cases of voodoo in the area. And I have some stories here that we can kind of delve into as we go through the course of the show. But there have been other voodoo cases.
And locally?
Locally.
Like super local.
This is cases in the Brockton area that have involved voodoo. So we have, of course, LaTarsha Sanders, who stabbed her 2 children last week. The 2 East Bridgewater women. Voodoo scare tactics used on Brockton woman before she was murdered. That was in 2014. We have Brockton teen pulls trigger after neighbor casts voodoo spell. That was in 2013. And woman waves machete while chanting, "I do voodoo." That was in 2013. That was in Middleborough.
So,
I mean, that doesn't mean any of these cases are actually involving real voodoo at all.
Right. But how about the 2 recent cases? Have we narrowed it down to a type of voodoo? Is it, any particular ethnic background?
The problem is, from what I can understand, there is Haitian background in all 3 women.
All right.
But the problem is the investigators who are investigating this are probably dismissing the voodoo angle altogether and aren't even paying attention to it. I tried reaching out to DA Timothy Cruz's office. I tried reaching out to some people I know in law enforcement in that area just to say, is there any more to this? Is there any more connections here that you are investigating? It's okay if you want to say, like, we aren't commenting on that because it is an active investigation.
Right.
But at least acknowledge the fact that there may be some sort of correlation there. But we will be joined in just a few moments after the news by Senn Moise. We will talk with him about this, basically about how people bastardize and co-opt this religion for their own nefarious purposes, and that voodoo at its core would not really involve killing your children. Now there are some sects and some beliefs where they will actually do that, and we can get into some of that stuff and more. I mean, I've been talking to everybody that I know that's an expert on cult activity, that's an expert in religious activity, just to try to get some sort of connections here. So we'll try to piece some of this together, and at the end of the night, we might not be any closer to figuring out any answers, but at least we can answer some of our own questions, if that makes sense.
Well, I know Senn Moise is actually an expert, and I don't want to get his title incorrect, but I'm sure that you have it, in Haitian voodoo. And I met him, and so did you, in Sleepy Hollow in October. It was actually our friend Krystal Madison who linked us up with him. To do this show. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. I know in the brief time that we had speaking with him, he was very knowledgeable. Very down to earth.
Great guy.
He was funny, intelligent, and we had a great time talking to him.
We'll talk to him in just a few minutes with more Spooky South Coast. Back, hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Well, it's hard to say hour number 2 because we only kicked it off with 15 minutes, but we'll try and make it up for you on the other end as long as everybody's all right with that. But we are talking about the paranormal as we do each and every Saturday night, and actually tonight we're doing a special edition of Spooky South Coast because, as I mentioned in the first part of the show, there's been 2 cases in which voodoo has come up. And I don't want to say 2 cases in which voodoo was involved in the crimes. I don't want to say in which people practice voodoo because I think we need to kind of get an idea of what voodoo is. And I learned about it, years ago, just a little bit. I mean, I don't know very much. But one of the first things that I learned about it is that when you hear people saying that they are practicing voodoo and doing things in the name, using voodoo to do things to people, they're probably not actually using voodoo. And so I feel like we need to really get an idea of what it is before we can kind of look at these crimes and say, is there something going on with it here? So we're very, very fortunate to have joining us on the line Voodoo Senn Moise, who was raised in Southern Conjure. And from the time he was 4 years old, he was learning the work of conjure and hoodoo. He was learning about the spirit and how important the ancestors are in his life and work. And he's also a high priest now, and he is joining us from New Orleans. So give me a second here to push a couple of different buttons. But we will get him on the phone. And Senn Moise, are you with us?
I am. How you doing?
We are doing spooktacular. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. Well, it's Mardi Gras here in New Orleans, so everything is kind of a little crazy right now. But other than that, it's pretty good, yeah. I
appreciate you joining us on what must be a very busy time with Mardi Gras. But then again, it's not like the party is ever going to stop, that you can't just, join us for a bit and then go out and join in the festivities.
Well, that is true. The party doesn't really ever stop here. But, that's neither here nor there. I was listening. Also, just so everybody knows, I am what's called Ugan Asogwe, a high priest in Haitian Voodoo as well. Yes, I was raised in Southern Conjure, and that's kind of a cousin. But I am in both traditions, okay?
So what is the difference between the two?
Well, when it gets right down to it, hoodoo in and of itself is really, it's primarily just magic work, whereas voodoo is a religion. I hate to use the word, but just so folks will understand, is an entire religion that is about honoring God, honoring the ancestors, and working with the Loa, or the spirits of the Voodoo.
So there is, for those who are unfamiliar, and again, as we mentioned, you're joining us from New Orleans. So I've been down to New Orleans. I was very fortunate to get to go there a couple of years, going back again later on this year. I love the city. I love the people there. Fantastic place. But it's not like it's something that is right out in people's faces. There's some shops and some different things where people can go and look into this, but it's not like it's something that is, most people who practice this, you don't know that they do.
Well, in some places that may be true. I will tell you that in New Orleans, that is true in part. It depends on how you define the term, not in people's faces, because I can tell you this, I can take you to a graveyard right now where you'll see all kinds of stuff going on that ain't got nothing to do with the gravestones or what have you. You'll see all kind of work that's going on that's there. So New Orleans is one of those places that, it's not necessarily directly in your face, but if you look close enough, you can see it everywhere. Take, for example, if you go into St. Louis Cathedral, which is, one of the big Catholic churches here. You go into there and there's a section, where they have candles that are, that there's lights that they set for folks and stuff like that. You can go in there and you'll see things like, you'll see things like coins, and you'll see things like, mojo hands and, stuff like that are set next to them, to give, the whatever dead that they're trying to honor, to give them, extra, edification or what have you. But like I said, it's not something that's like necessarily directly in people's faces, but it is all over the place here.
I know that there is some degree of those who do it as a business, those who do it for the tourism angle, all the different shops that you can go to, and I know that some are legitimate and some are kind of just for show.
Well, yeah, that is true. There are some folks that that are here to put on the show. I can't speak for them because I'm not one of them. Like I said, I'm an Ugana Sogwe in Haitian Voodoo. So I spend a lot of time between New Orleans and in Haiti, every year. We do ceremonies here that anybody is invited to come to, because most of voodoo ceremonies are actually open to the public. But when it comes down to why people are, what their motivations are for doing what they're doing, I mean, every man and woman has to work out their own salvation, so I can't answer for that. I can only tell you that when it comes to the voodoo in and of itself, the voodoo in and of itself is about honoring the ancestors. It's about overcoming oppression. It's about honoring God. It's about working with the Loa, and it's about creating change in people's lives. That's what it is, simply put,
And none of that sounds like it's anything even remotely negative. It sounds like it's very positive and very much something, of the positive, of the good, of the light.
Of course it is. It absolutely is. I mean, I will tell you this, that, a big issue, over the years that has happened when it comes to the voodoo is that, the media and Hollywood has kind of bastardized it and turned it into something, that it is not. And like, for example, I'm gonna get on a little, I'm gonna get a little soapbox here for a second. Like,
Sure.
For example, let's say American Horror Story Coven. They had this, the show, which was quite entertaining, absolutely. But then they, they bring out a Loa who they call Papa Legba, who was this dude with a Jamaican accent who ate babies and snorted cocaine out of his little pinky nail. Get the hell out of here. That could not be further from the truth of A, who Legba is, number one, but B, who the Loa are and what they do. That is just an example of how the media has taken, something that is one thing and completely tried to turn it into another. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe what they're fed. So they'll see that on TV and they'll be like, "Oh my God, Legba eats babies," or something, some dumb shit like that. And that's not at all what the voodoo is about. That's not what we do. That's not how we operate. And that certainly is not how that Loa is.
It's just, I think that there's been so much of the Hollywoodification of voodoo that it gives people that, because it's mysterious, because it's something that people don't know about, it's easy to fear it, and it's easy for it to become something that becomes a device for scaring people. And when you look at the way that Hollywood has portrayed it, it has taken away and stripped away a lot of what you're talking about, the actual tenets behind it, and it's turned it into something that's just there to freak people out.
And that's exactly what it has done. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the voodoo. And I'll tell anybody, any one of my ceremonies that I do, anybody is invited to. If you want to come to Haiti to a party ceremony is synonymous in the voodoo, just so as you know. Because it's a ceremony is a celebration of the Loa, it's a celebration of God, it's a celebration of the ancestors. Anybody is invited to come to that, to see, what exactly goes on. And I can tell you that there have been quite a few folks that are not in the voodoo who have come to ceremonies, that we have done, have come to ceremonies to see exactly, because they were curious. Because of, things that they may have heard or things that they may have seen, or what have you, that have had one particular, idea, that they're trying to convey about what the voodoo is, which was, a complete falsehood, to see what exactly it is. And like I said before, the voodoo is about honoring God, honoring the ancestors, honoring the Loa, and working with them to facilitate change in our lives. That's what it's for. That is the thing that it was born for, was to facilitate change. I mean, hell, look at the Haitian Revolution, for example. It was about overcoming an oppression that was there, and it took the voodoo to do that. To actually have the only successful slave revolt in history, because there was such an oppression there that the spirits came down, and what they did was they turned the tide in order for the people that were the slaves that were there to defeat Napoleon's army, not once but twice.
Well, we have another caller on the line, and Stephanie, I'll let you introduce our caller who's joining in.
Yes, so I believe this is our very good friend Krystal Madison, who is known as the Witch of Sleepy Hollow.
And
Let's
we're
bring her
going
on.
to push her through here. Make sure I lock everybody in. You with us, Krystal?
I am with you. Hello.
All right, and great. Thanks for joining us. And Senn, you can hear her okay?
I'm sorry?
Senn Moise, you can hear Krystal okay?
Oh, I can hear her just fine. Hey, Krystal, what you doing?
How are you, honey?
Sometimes, when we try to bring multiple people on, sometimes the technology doesn't work with us, but it seems like it's working
I had
okay.
an echo on my end until you put me through, so
Yeah, you might still get
clear as day now.
Okay, good.
So there's an actual question in the chat room that says, is voodoo similar to Santeria? And is that the case at all?
We have the perfect people on for that question.
They come from a similar place. You have to understand, when the people of Haiti and people of Africa were being enslaved, so were the people from Cuba and other countries. So what you had going on here was they were being converted to Catholicism. They didn't have a choice. And correct me if I'm wrong on any part of this, Senn Moise, on your end. They didn't have a choice. So they started realizing that the Catholic saints were very similar to the Loa, as far as, the Haitians and the Africans went. Santeria is similar, but different. There is a much heavier Catholic undertone to Santeria.
I would call it like a cousin to the like Santeria and the Voodoo would be like a cousin.
Okay.
Right.
Because they do come that they do originate from different places, but there are crossovers in both that are very, very similar. So I would say that it's more like like I said, it's like a cousin.
Because we do have, in this area, in New Bedford, we do have a good portion of people that practice Santeria.
Yes.
Right.
And it pops up in the news every couple of years where, and it's never an issue where there's any kind of crime involved. It's usually a health inspection issue. Mm-hmm. Is that they'll find out that somebody was conducting Santeria rituals with chickens, and they were not kept in sanitary conditions.
Wasn't that a recent thing where
there was
a
one
girl
that
murdered a bunch of chickens
and
locally?
They can't do anything
and
about
just
it because
blood
it's protected
everywhere and posted online.
As a protected religion, right?
Yep.
We have a very large Puerto Rican culture in this area, and Portuguese and Spanish and from all over. So
that's why a lot that Alan Alves had found was a lot of Santeria was going on in the Freetown Forest during the 70s and 80s.
And when we're talking about voodoo, Senn, we're talking about this being something that is, as you had mentioned, it's very much for change. So what is how does somebody normally practice voodoo? How does somebody go? What would be like a typical thing that you would do to conduct one of these ceremonies?
Well, ceremonies come about like walking you through. How do I do this? Basically, it comes about to where like there are a whole bunch of offerings that are prepared, like different foods and stuff like that the spirits, the Loa, that they like. There's drummers that come, and the ceremony in and of itself is all about, like I said, honoring God, honoring ancestors, and working with the Loa. We give the Loa honor. We call to them, and they come down. Possession happens very frequently in that. And the reason, possession happens is because the spirits want to commune with us, and they do it in a very, up close and personal way. And so, like what'll happen is that there'll be an altar that's constructed that has all these different offerings and stuff that they like, because when they come, to, what's called, to ride the horse, or the cheval, as it's called in Creole, there are things that they may want to take into themselves, to partake of, to eat, or what have you. We sing songs to them, we salute them, and basically what it is, it's, like I said, the word ceremony and the word party are kind of synonymous in the voodoo. And so it's an honoring, of those spirits, an honoring of God, an honoring of our ancestors. And at the same time, it is a form of communion with that, because when the Loa come down, they may come down because somebody has been doing some things that they shouldn't be doing, so they may want to scold somebody. They may want to do healing on somebody. They may want to give some sort of a blessing to somebody. So there's all kinds of things that go on, during a ceremony. But basically, I can tell you this, that, it doesn't involve like, us, eating babies or drinking blood or any of that crap. That Hollywood likes to portray it as, but it's more
and I just attended your ceremony
the whole purpose
last
of a
month.
ceremony is communion to the spirit.
And it was the most honest. I've been to a lot of rituals, a lot. I've been doing this a long time. I have never attended a ritual or ceremony that was as beautiful as this one. And I went in, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. And we got there early, and everybody worked together, making food, setting up the altar, cleaning the space. It was really a very touching experience.
But in opening yourself up for these spirits to come down and take possession of you, and opening yourself up that way, is it possible that something negative or something evil could come in and do the same? There must be a yang to that yin, and there must be some sort of darker force for the good, and is it possible that they can come and take you over?
In the context of a ceremony when that's going on, no. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the first thing that we do is we pray. We do what's called the Priye Guinea, the prayer of Africa. We're praying and praying and praying. And so there's protections that are set up, number one. Number two, if something were to slip through that, we have a lot of priests and priestesses that are there that we know what to look for, and we recognize, and if something is there that's not supposed to be there, we can make sure that it goes away real quick.
Okay.
Well, see, the reason that I ask is because, we've had these cases, and I know that you're a little bit familiar with what has been happening up here, but I'll give the audience a little bit of a primer on it too as I ask these questions, because we have two cases within the course of a couple of weeks of each other of these things happening, and actually the news of them happened within days of each other. But we have this story of there's two sisters, Peggy Labossiere and Rachel Hilaire. From what I understand, they're of Haitian descent. They live in a town called, was it East Bridgewater. And this mother, who knows them through her hair salon, thinks that her 5-year-old daughter is possessed by some kind of a demon, or maybe she's just expressing to these women that there's something wrong with her daughter. Anyway, they come to the conclusion that there's a demon possessing this 5-year-old girl. And so the mother takes the two children, they move in with these two sisters for a while, and they're conducting these rituals where they're blowing fire into the girl's face, permanently disfiguring her. They are rubbing, they're taking plants and they're rubbing it on the boy, including his genitals. They're threatening to cut off his head. This doesn't sound like what little I know about voodoo. It doesn't sound like any kind of ritual or ceremony that would take place.
And I couldn't agree with you more. But what I will say when it comes to that is that, a lot of times when people do things that are outlandish and crazy or whatever, it always turns to the devil made me do it. And I would say to this, what is the difference in that than a couple of like teenagers going out into like a cornfield and like killing something in the name of the devil? Really, there's no difference. But when it comes to the point of being responsible, the voodoo made me do it, or just it's, and quite frankly, like it's dumb and it's outlandish. But here's the thing: is that when somebody doesn't want to be responsible for something that they did, they will try to shift that to something else, to take the spotlight, so to speak, off of them. And quite frankly, what it sounds like to me is that, you have a case, or cases, I should say, of some sort of mental illness that's going on there to where they felt that they needed to do that. Because if indeed that was the case, what would have happened would be that child would be brought to an Ugan or a Mambo, and we would have taken care of it, not in that way, but we would have taken care of it to where, like, there could be healing, there could be restoration, or whatever was needed to go on, with, to bring the child back to wherever they needed to be.
So if I felt like I had, a child that was possessed by a demon, first of all, can a child be possessed by a demon in voodoo belief?
Can a child be possessed by a demon?
Yes. Could there be some sort of a negative force or entity or something that's controlling this child and making this child misbehave in that belief set? Would somebody who was a person who practices voodoo, would they recognize when somebody comes in and says, I think I have a demon, would they say, oh yes, that's probably a demon?
Okay, so being possessed by and having a spirit around you are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Possession, active, like possession by a demon, no. That's not something that's going to happen. Can you have a negative spirit that's around you? Yes, that does happen. And that's not just in the voodoo. That's in many traditions.
Right.
That's in many belief systems. But being able to recognize what is what and being able to discern what to do about that to correct the situation is a whole nother thing. And, like from what you're describing to me about, like, taking and like disfiguring like the children to try to drive away the quote demon or whatever the hell it is that they're talking about, is foolishness.
So what would be the process then if I brought you somebody and I said, I think there's something influencing my child and making my child act this way? It doesn't sound like it would be anything even remotely close to this. It would be kind of the opposite. It would be to attack this with as much, love and positive energy as you could.
Right. I mean, there are ceremonies that can be done. Absolutely. There are ceremonies that can be done and things that can be done to remove that from them, but it's not involving like mutilation or anything of that sort, because remember, the voodoo is all about the spirit. So guess what? If it's all about the spirit, then what do we rely on to facilitate these changes? The spirits themselves. So why would we have need to start to mutilate somebody or basically torture them, to quote drive away the demon or whatever it is that they were saying? We have no reason for that. If something needs to be done to make a spirit leave, we can make a spirit leave. That's just the way that it is. But all of this, like with all of that, that they're talking about, with that, like, that's a bunch of foolishness.
Somebody in the chat room said, well, then all those people must be mentally ill. But when you think about it, we talked about it earlier, us three, Tim, me, you, and Stephanie. What are the chances that all three would be mentally ill? Right. There's got to be something, like you said.
You have a mother that's buying into this,
I understand, and I see where you're going with this, but here's the thing. I don't know that it is a case of all of them being mentally ill, but you also, you have to think about it in this way. You have somebody who may be mentally ill, who has a strong influence over people that are weak-willed, and just willing to say, okay, to everything that somebody else does, and they'll go along with things. But I can tell you this, and I can tell you this with 1,000% certainty, as somebody who spends, like I said, I spend a whole lot of time in Haiti. As a matter of fact, I'll be back in Haiti in May. As somebody who spends a lot of time, in Haiti as well as, here in New Orleans, that what they're talking about, that has nothing to do with the voodoo. Nothing. And that's another one of those cases, in my personal opinion, it's another one of those cases to where it's like, the devil made me do it type of thing. Like I said, it's no different than somebody, going to a cornfield and like, sacrificing something or killing a kid or whatever in the name of the devil. It's no different. And there's always more than one, and usually the ringleader is the one with the mental illness, and the other two are just, dumb enough to follow along.
It's no different.
Look at the Salem witch hysteria.
Yep.
Right.
Very good example.
And what's funny about this is, in the people that I've spoken with and speaking with you, Senn Moise, over the course of this week, and Krystal, I know in your knowledge base as well, like these things that these women were doing to these children don't ring any bells to anybody as being any kind of ceremony for anything. Like
Not at all.
It doesn't sound like there's any kind of beliefs, even if you could say, well, that's not voodoo, it's this being miscategorized as voodoo. Like there just doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what it was they were doing.
Not at all. It's not voodoo. It's not witchcraft. It's not. Children are sacred.
Are there?
Children aren't harmed in voodoo.
Well, with that being said and being put aside, let's say it wasn't a child, it was an adult. Do they actually, in any type of rituals that voodoo is done, witchcraft is done, do they burn, like not say burn the person, but do they actually like light a fire over them, like blow the fire over them because it's supposed to remove the demon out of them? Is there something like that takes place that they could possibly be representing, trying to copy?
Absolutely not. The only time people have been burned are those who were accused of being witches.
Yes. Yeah.
That is not a part of our practice. I guess I'm not an expert in voodoo. Senn Moise is, but I have attended a ceremony, and it was nothing like that. Nobody was in a fire. Nobody was being burned. When I first heard this story, I messaged him immediately, and I sent him the link, and I was like, "You have to read this." I'm like, "This sounds like illness. This is not anything that I've witnessed or anything I've experienced or partaken in." He said, "Absolutely not."
It just seems like it's random, like just kissing the child like a snake, and setting people on fire and threatening to cut somebody's head off. It just seems like it's like, let's come up with the most horror movie tropes that we can come up with and try to claim that that's a ritual.
Yeah.
Well, like what our friend Aaron said in the chat room, maybe there's a local sect of voodoo that is bastardizing the religion. It takes one bad apple to get a bunch of followers and then teach people the wrong way. And I deal with that a lot. God, even with Reiki, with being a psychic medium, we all have that one story that pops up where this horrible medium cons somebody out of 20 grand and then people just keep going and going and going because they're sucking people in, and it could be something very similar to that. One jerk decided to do it the wrong way and get a bunch of others on board.
That's scarier to me. I would rather think that there is a vibrant voodoo culture here, and it's the kind of voodoo that Senn Moise is talking about. I would rather think that there's something like that going on here, and that there is a few bad apples that don't get it, or a few people who are trying to co-opt that for themselves and having this happen. The bigger picture of this, because we're going to get into this other case here now, is I'm really afraid that there is an entire group of people that are practicing it like this.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. Obviously there is, and it needs to be shut down. But how do you do it?
That's what's scarier than just thinking that there's these two things. So let me just give you the details.
And I'm wondering, before you go on to the next one, is the Brockton police, the Bridgewater police actually working together to see if, when they question these people, is there, and I hate to use the word cult, but is there a cult group or a group gathering that's going on somewhere, like you say, to practice this and learn this the wrong way?
Even worse, what if they're doing something totally different and just blaming it on voodoo?
That's, or, is it possible that it's just, they're not even mentioning the word voodoo, but it's just this is what the people who are reporting it back to them are thinking about it.
Yeah.
So let me just give Krystal and Senn Moise the details of this other case, because this is heartbreaking. Latasha Sanders was arrested Monday, January 5th after stabbing her two young sons, 8-year-old Edson Marlon Vodou and 5-year-old Lasan Vodou, to death as part of a voodoo ritual. The two sons were discovered and that's in quotes, I should say, quote, voodoo ritual. The two sons were discovered dead inside their home on Prospect Street in Brockton. Edson was stabbed approximately 50 times. When asked why she stabbed the boy, Sanders told police, quote, "It was because of the voodoo stuff." According to court documents, she said she stabbed him because she had failed in the ritual with Marlon. She failed in the ritual with the older boy that she had stabbed 50 times, so then she moved on and stabbed the 5-year-old boy. And family members told police that Sanders was into voodoo and was obsessed with the Illuminati rituals and sacrifices. This sounds to me like somebody who, just went online and looked up voodoo and got the wrong idea.
That is a bunch of cockamamie bullshit.
Thank you.
Voodoo
I was hoping you'd say it before I did.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no. Number one. Number two. Everything that you're that is nothing at all. What we do. It sounds to me like somebody done looked up some stupid ass article on Wikipedia and is trying to put the blame on something else other than themselves, because they decided that they wanted to try to do something, whatever that might be, and then ended up killing their own kids, probably, and God forgive me for saying this, but on purpose for some other reason. I guarantee that there is way more to that story than what's being said. I guarantee.
Because bottom line, whether you look something up or try to do voodoo or witchcraft or whatever it might be on the internet, you don't touch your child.
No, you don't.
Right, and
it's
that's
disgusting.
And there actually, one of these stories, I have a pile of papers in front of me, but in one of these stories, Plymouth County DA Timothy Cruz says, we have to let people practice whatever beliefs that they want to practice, but no belief system should ever involve harming a child, and that's where we have to step in. And I've heard from people all this week when talking about this, some people have told me there are some belief systems, not necessarily voodoo, but other belief systems where they do involve the children in rituals, but they would never murder them, they would never stab them, they would never harm them in any way.
Still not okay.
And I just, especially where the lady says, Sanders says, it was because of the voodoo stuff. That doesn't sound to me like somebody that actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to this.
No.
Of course not. Of course not. They have no idea what they're talking about. And I will tell you that in ceremonies, do kids come to ceremonies? Yes, they absolutely do. Do kids work the voodoo? Yes, they absolutely do. But again, we go back to the tenet of what the voodoo is: honoring God, honoring the ancestors, and working with the Loa. That has nothing to do with anything that's being described on here. What it sounds like to me is again, somebody's trying to shift responsibility onto something else because they don't want to be, responsible or accountable for their own actions.
I'm taking a look at this story, and I reached out to Sarah Klein, who works for the Enterprise. She's a writer for the Enterprise newspaper. She's been working on these stories, and she compiled a great piece where they look back at some other cases that have happened in the immediate area of these two cases over the last few years. And I didn't hear back from her in time, but I want to give her credit for being the one to have researched this. But in 2014, there was a woman named Florence Beaulieu. So again, we have a French-sounding name, so it could be somebody of Haitian descent. And she's a mother of four, was found dead in her Forest Avenue apartment. Her estranged husband, Jean-Michel Beaulieu, who is probably, at least French or Haitian, was arrested for murder. And one of their friends said that Jean-Michel had used voodoo as a scare tactic against Florence, placing voodoo candles on her doorstep, putting a crucifix and white powder in her home. Is there a darker side to voodoo? Are there spells that can be... and spell's the wrong word, ritual, whatever. I apologize if I'm mischaracterizing anything, but are there things that can be done in a negative way to bring harm to somebody?
There are negative sides to everything. Mm-hmm. And just as the voodoo has a positive, there are other things that can be done, absolutely yes. I would be lying to you if I told you otherwise. But I will tell you that in the voodoo in and of itself, the way that it is, the way that the tradition works, the way that it is that, again, we go back to honoring the ancestors, the Loa, and honoring God. Now, are there other things that can be done? Yes. Is this what this sounds like to me? And first of all, I'd love to know what a voodoo candle is, because I'm a priest and everything, but I never heard of that. I don't know what that is, but secondly, when it comes down to it, what you're looking at is that, did somebody try to cause harm to somebody else? Yes, they did. Are they using, the voodoo, apparently as whatever is being described here as the nation? Yes. Does that mean that that's what it is? No, it doesn't. Is there a darker side to it? Absolutely there is, as there is everything. But at the same point in time, we also have responsibilities to do what we're supposed to do, to make sure that things are right. And, if somebody decides that they want to say, well, I did this because, I'm using voodoo scare tactics on somebody, that's on them. But that in no way does that mean that is what, is actually going on. And it's not.
I think you both will agree with me. There's a negative side to everything, like you said, but it's all about your intention. It doesn't matter what religion is backing you up or behind you. If you have intentions to harm somebody, that's what your intentions are, no matter what.
Correct. If you look at the voodoo doll, here's a good example of something that's been taken.
That was my next question.
And turned into a scare tactic. You see the memes, and I am guilty of it too. I'll post a funny meme up there. Do you feel it now? Like things like that. But, those dolls were originally meant to heal. You insert the needle in certain areas to heal the person of an ailment.
That's very interesting.
And now you see, I don't know if you can blame Hollywood or mass merchandising, but that's what those dolls originally were used for. It wasn't, in other cultures, in other traditions, they're called poppets. Mm-hmm. If you walk down Essex Street in Salem, just about every shop has a doll in it. So
I was going to bring that up.
It's a type of sympathetic magic.
There is a shop in Salem that is actually, I believe the owner has ties to New Orleans. And I walked in the other day, and there was a bunch of voodoo dolls in there that were made with real bones, supposedly, and they were not meant to do good to anyone. So I was going to ask you what your take on that was.
Because they had real bones in them?
I'm confused. I don't know if if that's something that's typical to using in a voodoo doll, but they were advertised as not in the way that you described, not to heal others or to do
that was
good
their
to
original
others.
intent.
But can you do bad with them?
Sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny that you bring that up because it wasn't but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I actually passed on some information to Tim, and Tim, you remember the case that I gave you about that voodoo doll
in the haunted objects books, haunted objects book I wrote about it. Yep. That was a very, so if I have this right, you had been told that this object had caused problems for this family.
Supposedly 3 deaths.
And it was a fish doll.
Yep.
That was kept in some sort of an ornate box.
Yep. With candles.
And from what I understand, if I remember this right, there was the gentleman had picked this up, probably working on the docks with some of the Brazilians and the Portuguese that were down there. He picked up this item. He was told that he could use it because he wanted to cause havoc for his sister and his mother. Mm-hmm. And it ended up coming back and biting him in the ass and ended up making him very sick, and he died.
Yes.
And so then they ended up finding out that he had this going on. He was conducting ceremonies with this. And so you had said, I don't know anything about this. I don't know. This is just the story I was told. And I started doing some research, and I had come up with macumba, which I'd never heard of before, which is a type of supposedly Brazilian voodoo. Is that anything that either of you are familiar with, the idea of macumba?
I've heard of macumba, and I know a little bit about it, but can I tell y'all a big secret that's not really so much of a secret?
Sure.
It probably is to us.
Dolls in the voodoo.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, what was
I think voodoo and hoodoo are so interchanged. Hoodoo is a practice. Mm-hmm. Voodoo is a religion.
Yep.
It is, and there's a difference. It's just like Santeria is a religion, but brujeria is a practice. There's a difference. They're
What my question is, though, is like, for instance, that case that I dealt with where these 3 family members did die. So there was actual pictures of the family members on the doll, and where the pins were and the pictures were is where these people actually died from different things. The mother actually had a spine problem. I forgot exactly. It's been a few years, but her picture was on the back of the doll, pinned in to the spine. The sister had some kind of kidney problems and ended up dying, and I forget if it was cancer in the kidney or whatever it was, but her picture was pinned to the kidney. Those are some pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy coincidences. So could there actually been some type of voodoo magic that was going on to make that happen?
Well, the thing is I think you're incorrect when you talk about voodoo magic when it comes to the doll. Now, like me personally, can I work a doll baby to do good or to do, not so good? Absolutely I can, and I can tell you how to do it, but I won't do it on the air.
Okay.
But the thing is that in the voodoo itself, we do not use dolls. Like, period. We don't use dolls like that. Like, that is not a voodoo thing. That whole voodoo doll thing, that is another thing that has come about because of the media and Hollywood. Actually, if you want to go back to it, like the doll baby and stuff like that, you have the European side, which is the puppet, and then you also have the Congo side, which comes from the Nkisi, or the wooden statues with all the nails in them. Like, that's where that comes from. It has nothing to do with the voodoo, but it has been, like the term voodoo has seemingly become an umbrella term for all kind of, whatever bad things are happening. It has become a bad term to describe that, which is absolutely a farce.
But and as we said, though, it only takes one person trying to bastardize that belief set, and the fact that there is so much mystery around it that people just don't understand it. That's what's playing into a lot of this. Senn Moise, is this something that, like you said, people can come and see these ceremonies that take place? It's not a big secret. It's just something that people don't know about.
It's something that people may not know about, and the education that they get is either from watching movies or from the internet. And here's another gigantic secret: you can't learn voodoo from the internet, because I'll tell you this: that about 90% of what you find on the internet about voodoo is how do I put this nicely? Not true. And when it comes right down to it, like I said, about 90% of voodoo ceremonies are actually open to the public. Do you know why? Because the voodoo in and of itself is something that is oriented to the community as a whole. It is something that is not that is not a solitary practice. It's not a solitary thing. It is oriented to the whole community, the town, the village, what have you. It's oriented toward all that. So anytime a ceremony is going on, everybody is invited to come. Like they're really like the secrets that we have are things that, yes, we absolutely do keep, but to see what goes on, anybody pretty much can.
So there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to, nothing that should be looked upon negatively. It might be a different belief set than your own, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong, and it doesn't mean that it's anything that goes against what it is that you believe. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we hear, working in the paranormal world and working with, ghosts and things of that nature, and Stephanie having her mediumship abilities, is people will say, oh, well, that goes against God. But it doesn't. It sounds like everything that you're talking about goes hand in hand with many other religions and other belief sets. It's all the same idea. It's just different ways of practicing and different ways of acknowledging the ancestors and God.
You're absolutely right. But it's funny because you just said something that I found to be quite interesting. Is that, like people will say, like, you were talking about like with Stephanie's like mediumship abilities and, et cetera, how, it's something that goes against God. Well, let me ask you a question. Who the hell determines what is for and what is against God, and how do they determine that?
Right. It's all constructs of man anyway.
It's all man-made, written in books that people carry around with them.
I boycott religion anyway, so we won't go there.
You have to have faith in something.
No,
yes, I do, but I'm just saying the organized religion part I boycott.
Yeah. I think it's silly because you just end up judged, and I tell everybody all the time that I wouldn't have the gifts I do if God didn't give them to me.
The reason why I feel that way is only because when I went overseas for a tattoo convention, I happened to be in Milan, Italy, and you guys know, even if you haven't been there, there's huge, beautiful, beautiful cathedrals there. We went to walk in. The priest actually looked at me, my boss at the time, his wife, and said, "You guys aren't welcome," because of the way we were dressed, because of our tattoos. We argued with him that this is a house of God, we should all be let in. Wouldn't do it. Turns around, as we're walking away, he's taking money from other people to put into his church, And then here comes a gentleman wearing military uniform in a wheelchair pushing himself up the ramp. He goes to go in, and he literally grabbed him, spun him around, and pushed him away and said, "I've told you to stay away from here. You're not welcome. You take our money." So we ran back, got the guy, took him away, gave him some money. But that's when I totally lost and denounced against organized religion because of that. Anybody's supposed to be welcome in God's house.
All right, religion was created to control some and to allow for the rise of a few, and it doesn't sound like that's the case with voodoo at all. It sounds like voodoo is something that's very inclusive with everyone, and something that encourages camaraderie and companionship among people.
I think it's fascinating. I want to know more.
Companionship is something that is absolutely necessary. And I'll tell you this, the voodoo is very familial. It is about the family. It is about the community. Because why? And I'll go back to this again. When we're talking about the Haitian Revolution, took a community to do the ceremony of Bois Caïman to come together so that the revolution could begin and so that they could be free from the oppressors that were essentially not only enslaving them but murdering them and torturing them and doing all kinds of horrible things. So another tenet of the voodoo is community. It's not there is no singular anything when it comes to that. It is about the community as a whole, coming together as a whole to honor God, coming together as a whole to honor the ancestors, coming together as a whole to honor and to work with the Loa. That's what it is about. It is not about any of this, this dumb shit where these people, talk about oh, the voodoo made me do it crap. That has nothing to do with what the voodoo is. Not now, not ever.
All right. Well, that seems like a good place to leave it. Before we let you go, Senn Moise, why don't you tell us how people can come and find out more from you if they are going down to New Orleans, maybe 3 people in this room might be doing.
Yes. Are you around in November?
In New Orleans in November?
Yep.
Yes.
I will be here in November, yes. I'll be actually up in, where will I be? In New York in October. I'll be over teaching over in Sleepy Hollow in October at Krystal's event.
Well, John and I will be there, so we'll see you there.
We will see you there, but me, Tim, Stephanie, and Porter are all going down to New Orleans in November 9th
to the 11th.
Yes, so we should definitely all get together and meet up while we're down there.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. I'll be here.
We want to check out your shop and we want to learn more. So educate us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. You can come. You just come down here and we can do whatever it is y'all want to do.
And
if people want to find me, they can find me on Facebook under Voodoo Senn Moise. I co-own a store in New Orleans called Conjure New Orleans at 506 Dumaine Street in the French Quarter. I typically I'm teaching around the country, so depending on what time of year will kind of depend on where I'm at. In April I'll be in Nebraska. In May I'll be in Haiti. And then I go to Atlanta at some point. I think that's in maybe June or July. I forgot. And then, so just let me know, and I'll tell you where I'm going to be.
He has a book coming out in August.
Oh, and a book coming out as well? Well, we'll have to have you back on to talk about the book when it comes out.
Oh, yeah. I have a book coming out.
Just that little thing I wrote.
Yeah.
Well, we will definitely have you back on to talk about that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And we'll let you get back to Mardi Gras.
Yes.
Say hi to everybody for us, all the thousands of people that'll be.
I was going to say all 98,000 million people that's here.
Go collect a lot of extra beads for us, so when we get down there, we can have our own Mardi Gras.
Oh, you don't have to worry. There'll still be beads even in
Oh,
November.
really?
Oh, beads are year round.
I've never been.
Here.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. And Krystal, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming on.
And we'll talk to you in the future as well.
Sounds good.
Bye,
Have a
Krystal.
Good night now.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
All right, y'all have a good night. Thank you again.
You
Thank
as well.
you.
Thank you. That is Krystal Madison and Senn Moise. Senn Moise joining us all the way from New Orleans so we
Yes.
can find out really the truth behind some of this stuff. And we're going to take a break for the news coming up at midnight. When we come back, why don't we do a little bit of a wrap up?
Yeah, let's do that.
I feel like there's still some things that I want to discuss a little bit amongst the group here. And we can take your calls as well. 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. If you have any thoughts or questions, we'll just do another 15, 20 minutes when we come back after the news. And we'll try and see if we can get some more thoughts going around here, because I want to get into some more of the local side of things, and I don't want to bother the folks that aren't from here with some of these other things from the local angle that may or may not have any relation to their areas of expertise. So we'll do that coming up on the other side. Again, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420 are the numbers to call in. You can also email us spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can jump in the chat room at spookytv@spookysouthcoast.com. You can also find us on Twitter at SpookySC or use the hashtag SpookyLive. So we're going to take a quick break for the news. You will hear all the national headlines, and when we come back on the other side, more discussion about voodoo, more discussion about these local cases that have been plaguing us over the last few weeks, with more Spooky South Coast coming up. So I wanted to kind of just come back and do a little bit of a post game on the conversation that we just had, because it was great learning a lot about the true side of voodoo from Senn Moise and from Krystal. And this is something that, we've not really explored a lot on the show.
Right.
And I think that we should look into it more and discuss it more, because that can be an avenue for people to learn more about it. But I also think, too, that, we're never going to be able to shake a lot of these preconceived notions that people have about it.
Right.
We're never going to be able to get rid of that stigma that has been built up over hundreds of years. And I didn't want to get too bogged down in a lot of the religion conversation while we were learning. I didn't want to kind of veer off into tangents, but that is the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons I think why voodoo has this negative connotation, is because it was something that was, it was demonized by Christianity.
Right.
They were trying to keep people from turning to it. They were trying to keep people from practicing it. They were trying to make it look like, oh no, that's not. And there's a pattern to this. There's a pattern to this through history. So when you have religions like voodoo, when you have religions like paganism, when you have these belief systems that are all inclusive and would eliminate the need for any kind of hierarchy and for any kind of mass control, I think that you've seen that get quashed by these bigger religions, and especially Christianity, because of its power and its reach. So they were always looking to squash these other religions from being able, and co-opting them too. I mean, as we've discussed here in the past, both off the air and on the air, that a lot of the religions that a lot of the holidays that people celebrate have been co-opted pagan religions that are just like, now they're suddenly, there's a reason why we celebrate Jesus' birth on December 25th when he probably was born in March?
I forgot, but I think it's March.
And then, Easter didn't happen, the resurrection didn't necessarily happen in the spring.
Right.
But it was convenient to take over the pagan spring rituals.
Solstice and equinoxes. And
so there's, a lot of that's happened through history. And I think that, because there wasn't a lot that they could co-opt from voodoo,
right,
that they just kind of gave it that darker side to it to make it look like something people would be afraid of. So I think that's part of the problem here, is that plays into whatever is going on here locally, whether it be just some twisted people that just happen to latch on to that as their rationale to explain this behavior, or, as we were saying before, is there something going on here? is there some kind of a connection here? Is somebody influencing them? Because if we go back, John, you had mentioned the stuff in Freetown, and if we go back, I was talking to Alan Alves about this week, and trying to pick his brain, and I won't get into too much of what he told me because I didn't ask him if it was on the record, but basically he just said to me, like, there's stuff going on all the time.
Yep.
And there's groups and sects and belief systems that aren't always on the right side of things, that aren't always on the good side of things. And so if that's happening, is it possible that this is I won't say voodoo, because obviously they're going against everything that is actual voodoo teachings, but is there some kind of a cult operating that's masking itself with voodoo, or playing on people's negative associations and connotations based on the Hollywood version or the way that other churches have presented voodoo? Are they using that to their advantage to make this into something?
Right.
Which we see that happen all the time with satanic cults. They don't necessarily believe in Satan. They don't necessarily believe in, and again, true Satanism is certainly different than the people who are often associated with being Satanists, satanic cults. But, they're just looking to be the opposite of what everybody else is doing. They're looking to be for them, it's more about not doing what everybody else is than it is about having a firm belief set. And I wonder if this isn't the same thing.
Right.
If this isn't like we're going to do some bad stuff, and this is going to be a convenient scapegoat for it. So we're going to be this voodoo cult.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Alan's told me plenty of times, and I didn't believe it till I went and saw it with my own eyes. He says you go out on these, and he showed me there is an actual Santeria cult calendar, and he showed me it, and I just, not him, just in general, I'm like, there's no way anybody believes this stuff anymore, anybody does this. And he told me, no, there's people still out there. And one night I went to the top of the tower, the fire tower in the forest, and he says, you watch, you look out there, you'll see it going on this date. Went down over close to where it was going on, and there was tons of cars. And I mean, I don't know what they were doing, but everything fit the profile of what he said. So I believe there still is stuff going out there. And why couldn't they be, masking themselves as, we're doing voodoo, just to make it so it doesn't look like they're doing what they're actually doing and blaming it on something else?
Or could it be that, they are operating under these other... I mean, obviously the case of the murder is different. The case of these women abusing the children, because they specifically mentioned voodoo.
Right.
Yes.
But it's also possible that because there are those who are involved in this, law enforcement, district attorney's office, that they may not be familiar with all the ins and outs of what they're dealing with. You would like to think that they are knowledgeable about it, but they might not be. So they're putting these labels on it as a way to kind of categorize it. There's not enough Alan Alves to go around. Like, there isn't an Alan Alves on every police force that can be an expert in this kind of thing.
Yep.
And we can tell you, we're not naming any names or anything, but more often than not, when something like this goes on, people will ask us, what does it mean?
Yes.
Or who can we refer them to?
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times, younger police officers that don't know about Alan and his reputation as being the cult cop, people who will say, hey, who can I talk to about this? And I've had to give them Alan's contact info because there's just not that level of expertise anywhere anymore. Yep. And he's, somewhat kept his finger on the pulse of what's going on, but as he said, he's even tried to not have to deal with it as much anymore because it did take up so much of his life. So,
and I'm sure seeing certain things and learning certain things, it kind of overwhelms you after a while, though, too.
You eventually get to the point where enough's enough.
Yep.
And you can't deal with it. But that's what worries me the most about this, is that now that this is in the news,
are we going to see more happen?
There's going to be more of it happening. And it's funny. The one person I didn't think to reach out to this week, and I probably should have, was Lauren Coleman, because he's the one who tracks a lot of when there's copycat things that go on. And this is something to keep an eye on, because there will definitely be copycat crimes from this. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see more people murdered, and let's hope that we don't, but there's going to be people that are caught doing things that are going to blame it on this.
Right, of course.
Because it's convenient. Or maybe there are some people that are going to say, I didn't realize that voodoo was a thing around here. I'm going to look into this. And as Senn Moise was saying, they're going to try and learn from the internet, And what are they going to find? Maybe they'll find some other local people in chat rooms that are dealing with chat room still a thing. I don't know.
I don't know.
But they'll find
like
some,
Reddit is a thing.
They'll find some local people who are involved in this.
It's like a blog type forum website.
I'm not that good with Reddit either.
I'm computer
It's
illiterate
overwhelming.
most of the time. I still got her running my Instagram and Twitter.
Well, you shouldn't tell other people when somebody's running it for you.
Why?
Keep up the illusion that it's you.
I don't want that.
You run your own Twitter lately.
2 posts a month, maybe.
You can tell when it's John because he goes to type one letter and hits 3.
Yes.
From his giant thumbs.
Yes.
I know.
I have this, I have the same
or I
problem.
get yelled at from her with voice texting.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
Well, I mean, sometimes we have trouble understanding you. I can't imagine how your phone gets.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But that's the big worry here is that it's a twofold worry that there's going to be copycat effect from this, and also that what if there is actually something out there operating?
Yep.
And I was just going to say that. I mean, right now they don't know for sure if there is. There could be some group in the Middleborough, Fall River, wherever, Brockton, Braintree area, that's operating, giving the wrong idea of what they're supposed to be doing, and teaching these people, like he said, learning off the internet, teaching them the wrong thing. We could see even more happen.
It takes one person to reach the level of the point where they're the focus of a group of people, and just that one person has to be convincing enough, and then whatever it is that they're selling, all the followers will start buying.
You know, it's funny, you the way you just said that made me think of a show that I'm watching right now, and it's based on a real case that happened a long time ago, Waco.
Yep, I've been watching it too. I was thinking the same thing.
And that's exactly what it is. It took that one guy to make everybody believe that he was the Messiah, that he was this, to follow him, and what did they all do? They all followed him.
And I'm not enough of a biblical expert to know.
Yes.
Like, hey, I don't know. That's just David Koresh checking in. I don't know if I know enough about it to say, if the stuff that he was saying was right or wrong. But, he had people that lived with him that were biblical scholars that would know if he was, bastardizing the Bible for himself and using, the stuff written in the Bible for his own means. And they didn't call him out on it. So he must have been, and I look at something like that and I say, well, like, who's to say that he was wrong? Who's to say that if he had people believing in him and, just because they didn't follow the law doesn't mean that they were wrong in their beliefs. And the same thing can be said for some of these other cults and organizations that are out there. Just because they might do things illegally doesn't mean that they're wrong. Like we were talking about, if there are people locally practicing Santeria, and I know that there are, and I know that there's people listening right now that do, that's protected. And as long as it's not harming anybody else or getting in the way of anybody else, then they have to allow it to take place. But it's just because it got to the point where, it wasn't sanitary that we found out about it. That if they just cleaned up after themselves or kept the chickens a little cleaner, then nobody would have ever known what they were doing. I don't know. There's nothing that I've believed in strong enough to, want to dive into any of this stuff. But I do understand when people do believe how powerful that belief can be.
Of course.
And how easily it can be that, somebody can, I don't want to say fool you, because fool you implies that they are intentionally trying to, lead you down the wrong path. And I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of these times these, cult leaders, they fully believe what it is that they're doing. They just might not be correct about it.
Yes.
And so it's possible that could be operating. But when you have 2 instances where children are hurt,
right,
and in the case of 2 of them killed, that's a huge cause for concern.
Oh, absolutely.
And I really hope, and I'm sure that they are, but I really hope that law enforcement and the DA's office, I hope that they're looking into these connections and trying to see what's going on here before this happens to somebody else.
right.
So
I'm sure they are.
I mean, I would think with how close the cities are, being neighboring cities, and I would think that they have to be looking at the coincidence.
And it seems like they're all of Haitian descent. So is there a cultural community connection there? Doesn't mean that there is. There are a lot of people here from Haiti that live in this area. Doesn't mean that they know each other.
Brockton is very packed with it. I mean, I run I own the tattoo shop up there, and I see it all the time. There is a lot of Haitian descent in Brockton.
But it doesn't mean that they know each other.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that they're, worshiping together or any of that. So I don't know. I always say this with what we talk about here. Our job is to kind of learn as much as we can and share that with the audience and leave you to kind of make your own conclusions. But I will say this. If you are listening to us and you're local, if you're in the Brockton area, the Bridgewater area, even if you're here on the South Coast, if you know anything about this, anything about whether it be those who practice voodoo or say that they do and might not be practicing it correctly or any of that, let us know. Because I would like to be able to connect with some local people and be able to talk with us again. Of course, it's great to be able to go right to Senn Moise in New Orleans and find out the actual truth, but I'd like to find out a little bit of the local impact and the local angle on this as well. So you can reach out to us at spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. That's the way to get a hold of us all week long. You can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. We were talking about maybe doing some Spooky South Coast Snapchat too somewhere down the line. Apparently we still have a Spooky Triangle Facebook filter because Gazelle found it the other night from when we did the Spooky Triangle. He was like going through because he loves to do stuff with Facebook filters, and he found the Spooky Triangle one. So it was like, whoa, wow. So we'll play around with some more of that stuff as well. We like to have fun.
Stephanie can run the Snapchat.
I hate Snapchat.
I've sent her things on Snapchat that she's never opened.
I probably haven't even opened it.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's not personal.
I just figured I'd give you more to do.
I like Snapchat because if people want to see anything that I'm doing, like visually, I like Snapchat because I use the filters because then you don't have to look at my face. So.
Do you remember when I tried to get you to take pictures with me with filters and you're like, that's stupid. I'm not doing that.
It is stupid. It's totally stupid, but it's better than looking at my face.
I'm just not going to put on...
I tried.
Reindeer horns or...
No, I don't do any of those.
Bunny ears with a bunny nose.
Why not?
And no.
I don't do any of that crap. No, I'm not looking to be a dog or...
Oh, okay.
No, but like they have ones like promoting certain things, like when a movie's coming out or something, like you can make yourself Star Wars,
like a Star Wars.
Yeah, like I'll do that kind of stuff. Or there was one where like they had you skiing, like that's kind of funny, like things like that I'll do. But no, I'm not going to turn myself
I could say so
into a
much.
dog.
Oh my god, it's time for bed.
All right, well we're going to wrap it up anyway, and we will be back next week with another edition of Spooky South Coast. Until then, for John, for Stephanie, for Matt, for everybody else, I'm Tim. We want you all to stay spooktacular. We now join programming already in progress.